the Day of Atonement itself. So I'm going to skip a little bit in Leviticus. I find some of these rather interesting, though, so I have a hard time deciding what to not talk about, but just because I find it interesting doesn't mean that you'll necessarily find it interesting when we get into some of these details of Leviticus 12 through 15. But we'll take a look at that. So, by way of review, we talked about sacrifices, and the purpose for the Day of Atonement is how can a holy God live with a sinful people? So the Passover, since we're talking about Easter, the Passover sacrifice, as the pastor mentioned this morning, is not the Day of Atonement sacrifice. The Day of Atonement sacrifice happens in the fall, after the New Year. The Passover happens in the spring. Now, the Passover is supposed to follow the lunar calendar, so it follows a lunar calendar is 30 days, so 360 days in a year. It doesn't have the extra 5. It's 30 times 12. And so if you notice it all in the news, Ramadan started a couple weeks ago. It's the Islamic time of fasting. The Jewish time of fasting is the week of Passover. So it started last week on Friday night. The Islamic calendar continues to follow the 360-day calendar. So Ramadan is a different time of year every year. It moves. So this year it's in March, April. Next year it'll be in like April, May. It'll continue to move around the calendar. After the resurrection of Christ, in the early centuries after Christ's resurrection, the Jewish calendar was solidified, so that Passover and New Year and all of the sacrificial system was set in one time of the year, always. So Hanukkah is always in December. The New Year is always in September. The Day of Atonement is always in September or October. And Passover is always in spring and follows the Christian calendar. So the fact that this is the Passover week and it happens to be Good Friday on Friday, that's not accidental. That was something that happened by influence of Christianity. Christianity influenced the Jewish religious calendar. So it's been that way where they're together ever since Christ's crucifixion, or shortly after Christ's crucifixion. So anyway, so that's Passover. So Passover is slightly different than the Day of Atonement, although the message is very similar, right? The Passover tradition was a remembrance of the Exodus account, when they were to take, as Pastor mentioned earlier, they were to take the blood of the lamb and sprinkle it with hyssop over their doorpost. And when the angel of death came, if he saw the blood over the doorpost, anyone who was inside the house, the angel of death passed over the house. That's where the word Passover comes from. Okay, so this angel of death would pass over the house and go on to the next house. And if that house had blood on the lintels, then the angel of death would continue. He would pass over that house and go on to the next one. So Passover is a remembrance of the deliverance of the people of Israel and from the 10th plague. This is the 10th plague in Egypt, from the 10th plague. So the Day of Atonement was a day that was set once a year in the fall to, again, cleanse Israel from all of its sin and uncleanness. And this is in Leviticus 16. In verse 16, I think, 16. The high priest shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleannesses of the people of Israel, and because of their transgressions, all their sins. So the Day of Atonement was an annual sacrifice that kind of started the slate over for everyone, a clean slate. But the sacrifices, the priesthood, the sin offerings, and the uncleannesses, all of that's taken away. So Leviticus 1 through 15 describes all of that for us. The sacrifices, the priesthood, and the uncleannesses is what we're in now in chapters 12 through 15, well, 11 through 15. But in particular, 12 through 15. That's what I just said. I had a slide for that. So that's what we're after. Now, we talked about what does it mean to be unclean? And the Old Testament has these categories. Something can be holy, or something can be common. You can't be both at the same time. So something that is holy is something that is set apart for a holy purpose, for serving the Lord. And the missionary Mansell, he mentioned this last week as well. He actually gave us a definition of holiness last Sunday. So it's like even the utensils. So like we have serving spoons and dishes in the kitchen, bowls in the kitchen. They are set aside for a particular purpose. You can't take them home with you. You shouldn't take them home with you. And use them in your kitchen. You can't borrow them. You can. Okay. But so my analogy breaks down. But the point is, those are holy. They're set apart for a particular purpose. That would be holy. Common would be what we use at home, everyday dishes. Then we have the categories of pure and impure, and or clean and unclean. And those are the same words. Clean and unclean, pure and impure, the same words in Hebrew. The difference here is pure and impure comes from Greek, and clean and unclean comes from I was going to say German, but I don't think it's German. It might be Old English. So, anyway, it's just different words for us in English. But it's the same in Hebrew. And the idea of purity or impurity, if you're pure, you are allowed to participate in holy activities. You can go to the tabernacle and bring a sacrifice. You can participate in the Passover, as Pastor mentioned today. Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus, they would have been outlawed from participating in the Passover on Friday evening after they buried Jesus' body, and anyone who was with them. I thought about talking about those laws today, but we'll talk about them probably in a few weeks in May. They would not have been allowed to participate because they were unclean. They were impure because they touched a dead body. So they could not participate in holy activities. In the Bible, there's also the moral versus ritual. So moral impurity is when is a result of sin. Someone sinned against somebody else. They have defiled. Usually, is the word we see in English. They could defile the other person. They could defile the land. They could defile themselves as a sinner. This is a moral impurity that's caused directly by the result of sin. Ritual impurity is not a direct result of a sinful act. And that's what we're talking about in Leviticus 12 to 15. When we say ritual impurity, we're saying that if you're in a state, you touch the dead body, now you can't participate in the Passover. Touching the dead body was not a sinful act. But it made you unclean ritually, so you could not participate in any of the rituals. Okay, so I hope that kind of helps. I should probably try to figure out how to maybe draw a picture of that relationship. So what we're talking about are ritual impurities. What's interesting about this is, and I put here spiritual, not physical, but I don't know if that works either. One of the best examples I can come up with happened during COVID. Not to get controversial about COVID, but you remember how people talked about those who didn't get a vaccine? There were public personalities who made statements like, if you didn't get a vaccine, then you should not receive medical care. Okay, they did. You can find it. Okay, I'm not making it up. What they're saying is, not the fact that you're carrying the disease, and so something is physically wrong with you. That's not it at all. What they're saying is, you are impure. You are unclean. You are not allowed to participate in society because you are in a state of not being vaccinated against a particular disease. It had nothing to do with the disease itself. It had to do with the fact that you weren't, for whatever reason. And that really was something that kind of surprised me when it happened, but it also surprised me that it so reflected this idea of ritual impurities. You are not allowed to participate in society if you have not received this vaccination. And you can fill in any part of the blank, right? You cannot participate in society if you have a boot on your left foot. Like, you can think of anything you want. You cannot participate in society if you don't have your wisdom teeth. Right? Only people with wisdom teeth can participate in society. Like, you can make whatever you want. This is the idea of ritual impurity. And COVID has actually quite a good example of it. All right. So, the types of ritual impurities, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, or well, it was 3 weeks ago since I've been here. And I added here that childbirth, leprosy, the issues of sexual organs, and death. There are situations in all of those that require sacrifices. The food-related laws don't require sacrifices. But they require not sacrifices, but in those sacrifices is included a sin offering somewhere along the line. And this is why this group of impurities is somewhat of a question in the Old Testament. Well, if a sin didn't occur, giving birth is not a sin, why does the mother have to bring a sin offering? For ritual impurity, which is not, that impurity is not a result of sin. So, what's the relation? And so forth. So that's what we're going to investigate. Okay, so our class is a little short on time today, which is okay. So we'll take a look at childbirth. So Leviticus 12, maybe because it is so short, we'll just read it real quickly. And then we're going to go to Luke 2. Leviticus 12 says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a woman conceives and bears a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. Okay, so case law. We're talking about a woman who conceives and bears a child. And the first subset is a male child. In verse 6, we'll have a female child. As at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. Now that's a cross-reference to Leviticus 15, which we're not going to go into in detail. But it's cross-referencing Leviticus 15. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Then she shall continue 33 days. In the blood of her purifying, she shall not touch anything holy, or come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are completed. So she has a 7-day impurity. Then the baby is supposed to be circumcised, so she can participate in that activity. That activity, however, does not happen at the tabernacle or the temple. Circumcision doesn't, it happens at home. Sometimes people get that confused in the birth narrative of Jesus, Luke 2, which we'll look at. But those are two different things. And the child is often named on the 8th day as well. But then she has another 33 days where she's unclean, and it points out to us that for those 33 days, she shall not touch anything that's holier, nor come to the sanctuary. So that's what it means to be unclean. She's impure. So she's impure, she's ritually unclean, so she's not allowed to participate in those activities that we consider holy, those rituals that we consider holy. For a total of 40 days. Then verse 5 says, but if she bears a female child, she shall be unclean for 2 weeks. So instead of 7 days, it's 14. Then she shall continue in blood with purified 66 days. So the total of 80 days if she has a girl. So everything's doubled if she gives birth to a girl versus if she gives birth to a boy. Verse 6 then is the law for purification. When the days of her purifying are completed, whether for a son or a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb, a year old for burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. So she has to bring a sin offering once she is clean, so that she can bring that to the tabernacle. So her cleanliness at one point is just waiting. She just waits the 40 days or the 80 days. But notice in verse 7, he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her. But it doesn't say then she shall be forgiven her sin, like it did in Leviticus 4 or 5. But it says she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. If she can't afford a lamb, then she brings 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for burnt offering, one for sin. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. So there's a rule in there for those who are poor. Now Luke. Yeah, Luke, they got Leviticus. Luke chapter 2. There's like so much. Just reading that passage, there's so much I want to talk about. You won't get to it. I'll try to get the highlights. So Luke chapter 2, in verse 22, Luke says something here that's very controversial. See if you can catch it. Verse 22 says, and when the time came for their purification, according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. When the time came for their, plural, purification.
Could you emphasize there?
Because who's impure? According to Leviticus 12, it's only the mother. It's not the child, not the father. It's only the mother, it's a single person. Mary, Joseph, and Jesus go to the temple, and Luke says their purification. So this is highly controversial. Was Jesus impure? I actually don't think that there was ever a time in Jesus' life where he was impure, ritually impure. There's a lot that we can point to on this. Being born doesn't make you ritually impure, according to Leviticus 12. Jesus never touched a dead body. Remember what he said to Lazarus? He spoke to Lazarus, Lazarus came out. There was a woman who was having that issue according to Leviticus 15. She was ritually impure. And any person that she would touch, just like here in Leviticus 12, that person would become impure. She touched Jesus' clothes. And the text says the power went out of him and healed her. His impurity was protected, she became cleansed immediately. So the scriptures in the New Testament, they also seem to protect Jesus' purity, ritual impurity as well. Now, there's going to be times the Pharisees are going to claim that he's ritually impure, or his disciples, but Jesus is going to talk about, that's what Pastor mentioned, the fence around the law. That's usually, he wasn't breaking the law, it was their fence that around the law. Okay, anyway, that's another.
So Luke was referring to Joseph anyway?
I don't know that he was referring to Joseph, because Leviticus 12 doesn't refer to husband, but a father. Though it's possible Joseph could become ritually impure, according to Leviticus 15. It is, anyway, controversial statement. It should have been first, but he said there's no reason to think that. So they brought him, Jesus, up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every mouth first opens the Lord shall be called holy to the Lord. And there is, that's a very interesting topic as well. There's something in the Old Testament called a ransom for the firstborn. The sacrifice of the first fruits in the Old Testament, a farmer or somebody who raises cattle was to bring the first of everything to the Lord as a sacrifice. So your first harvest, or first part of your harvest, went to the Lord. You got the rest, but the first part was him. And then you got another 10% of the rest. Your first born calf in spring goes to the Lord for sacrifice. You don't get to keep it. Same was true for a firstborn male. Your first male child wasn't supposed to be sacrificed to the Lord, but was supposed to be given to the Lord. And there's a whole set of laws about ransoming your firstborn son back. So you would give money to the temple or tabernacle so you could keep your son. And in an agricultural context, your firstborn son is really important. As we heard in Raleigh's testimony, and his son and his grandson, when you're working on a farm, your firstborn son is important. Would you agree? From your experience? So anyway, there's lots around that. So anyway, she brings, so notice verse 24, she brings a pair of turtle doves and 2 young pigeons. And as we just read, because that means that Joseph married at this time, did not have a lot of money, they would be considered poor. And Joseph was probably, when we use the word carpenter, he was probably a stonemason, probably wasn't a wood carpenter. But regardless, there was a slump in the new housing market back then in Galilee, and they weren't very well off. But they were poor. They brought birds. So this is why they did that. Now back in Leviticus 12, just wanted to point that out with Jesus. Referencing Leviticus 12. So we have two laws, one for male children, one for female children. And as I pointed out, there's a distinction that Leviticus 12 makes between males and females. So if you have a newborn child, and you want to know the difference between a male and a female, how do you know the difference? You look, right? And when you look, you know whether the child is male or female. And the mother then knows which she's supposed to follow, which set of rules she's supposed to follow. What's interesting about the term male and female in verse 7, this is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. Is that word male or female is found particularly in only one other place in the Old Testament.
Genesis?
Genesis 1. These words, male and female, are actually reference to the to our sexual organs. It's not the word for male, it's not the word for female. It's the word for male sexual organs and women's female sexual organs. That's the words that are used. And in Genesis 1, then it's when you have the creation of Adam and Eve, and it says in verse 27, God created man in his own image, and the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. It's the same phrase. Well, maybe I didn't say it before, but it's the same two words. So our body, our gender, or our sex in the legal way, is very much a physical thing. There are only two. There is no spectrum of genders here. And it's obvious at birth. Now, the contemporary world, there's a fight right now in the contemporary world that we have more than two. You could have, maybe you talk to hundreds, open spectrum perhaps. And this is really it's a satanic attack on truth. This is not how God created the universe. He didn't create it in any other creature, and he didn't create it in men and women either. Even though, so when the woman sees a child and sees it as a female, her purity lasts twice as long as the male. Now, some people will say, well, that's discriminatory. It's just showing that men are, in that patriarchal society, men are more important than women. And I don't think that's the case for a couple of reasons. One, from the verse I just read in Genesis 1, God created men and women, both of them, in his image. We're created equally. We're all created in the image of God. We all bear his image. And so I don't think it's saying that men are more important than women. What I think it's pointing to, though, is the fact that there is a distinction between men and women. So, a lot of times you see a newborn baby, and it's all wrapped up. Might even have a little pad on it. And you don't know whether it's a boy or a girl. When you walk up to the little baby, because you don't know whether it's a boy or a girl, you say, oh, what a cute little baby. What is it?
Or you guess wrong.
Or you guess wrong. Or maybe the mother is put a bow, keep a bow so the kid's head, so a cute bow, so people know it's a girl. That kind of thing. But you don't know. But if the mother is participating in a ritual where she is unclean for 60 or 80 days, that stands out. Well, the mother is still unclean. She's still not participating in these religious events. Why is that? Oh, she must have had a girl. Or she's already participating in these events. She must have had a boy. So this becomes a sign of distinction. Circumcision is another sign of distinction. There's a window of opportunity for the mother to participate in the circumcision between the 7 and the 32 days. She gets to participate in that ritual of circumcision. The girls aren't circumcised. And that unfortunately went out today because in Islam, if you circumcise both men and women, both circumcised males, they circumcise females. So only the males are circumcised. That again becomes a sign, an outward sign of Jewish identity, but also the difference between males and females. So I think it's just really pointing to the fact that there's a distinction between the two sexes, if there is a difference, and it's an outward sign to the community of what the difference is, what actually is going on. So there is a difference between the two. Now, why a sin offering? I think you can do that. So why a sin offering? for cleanliness. So here, to restore her to purity, she waited a number of days, but now she has to offer a sin offering to be declared clean by the priest, so she can enter back into society, enter back into ritual life. So in Genesis 1 through 3, I put here, but we'll look at Genesis 3, I think. Well, let's go back to Genesis 1. Genesis 1:27. God created man in his own image, in the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. So all men and women are created in the image of God. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over every living thing that moves on the earth. And Jeremiah, Rob's grandson, yesterday, his testimony of Rob. And the animal husbandry. Okay, so Adam and Eve were to have children. Now, they had no children in the Garden of Eden. So the question, what we don't know then is, what would the process of birth and delivery have been before the fall? Well, we can only make some guesses based on the curse. So, the curse, of course, is found in Genesis 3. And there's one other thing in Genesis 12 on the law. Not Genesis 12, Leviticus 12. What was it Abraham said? Leviticus 12 says, if a woman conceives and bears, okay? If a woman conceives and bears. Now, you can't bear a child without first having conceived a child. So it's kind of a Hebrew way of speaking. But I think the point of that, because they didn't have they knew how things worked, okay? But they didn't have the medical knowledge of what we know today. But they knew how things worked. The idea of conception really is the beginning of the process. What we would consider conception. I think conception is the right word. When she conceives and then bears. Conceiving is at the beginning of the process. Starts it off, if you will. Bearing, giving birth, that's the end of the process. So she conceives, she bears the child, she bears the child. Okay. That's from beginning to end, the process. Now, keep that in mind that when we look at